We're going to talk about the classroom-based assessment. We're going to talk about the assessment task. We're going to go about the final task. I'm just going to speak about oral communication, and then Tomas is going to explain the other elements. Oral communication, we've already mentioned, is at the end of second year. Currently, it is a 3-week period during which students will plan, research, prepare, present, and reflect on an oral communication. Now, I'll come to those steps in a moment. What is an oral communication? It is a 3-minute speaking moment. I hesitate to use the word presentation because presentation is only one way in which you can do it, because there are many ways you can do it. But these are the suggested topics that they might like to talk about. Okay, nothing new. You could fit almost any topic into those areas. And they can make a presentation, they can do an interview. There are actually 4 styles in which they can do this. They can even act, they can do a performance. One of the greatest learning curves for me, because I actually did a trial run at one of these, and I was informed I actually went to the NCCA and asked them, how can I do this? And I worked with them to see how would I do it if I was doing it for real. And one of the most interesting things for me was just about knowing about this area here. It's not just about presenting. It's not just about going and learning midterm break and speaking it very slowly for 3 minutes. They actually have to plan and research and prepare. Now, prepare doesn't say this explicitly, but prepare does include writing. But if we move back a moment, there's an example we have in our book. At the beginning of oral communication, we lay it out, exactly what's involved in it, the priorities. And if you look at the end of the chapter, you will see there is an example of how it's done. 446 has an example of actually how it's structured. So the example we've used is, imagine if you were trying to picture a scene, an interview between Oprah Winfrey and a character out of To Kill a Mockingbird. Imagine what that would be like. And so a student has to go off and research. So we would imagine a student going online and watching Oprah Winfrey, and what is her style of interviewing? What kind of questions does she ask? Does she ask open or closed questions? And a student would have to be looking at that, and you'd be guiding them through this process. But you've already taught about open and closed questions anyway. So that's what you'd be saying, look at those questions, etc. And they would also be informed, obviously, by the book, because they have to know about the character who's being interviewed. So they're planning it, they're researching it, and they're preparing it. That preparing includes writing. They must write. They must write their own work. They cannot just copy, transcribe across, and then speak it. It must be their own writing. And so there were incidents of students who learned off an amazing speech they'd heard online, and then they delivered it. But that's not actually fulfilling, because if you read the learning outcomes which relate to oral communication, writing is in there. And that's really, really critical, because I didn't understand that. I did not realize that. So that's really critical to understand. So, and finally, they will present it for 3 minutes with one, but they can do it as a group. So give or take 6 minutes. It doesn't have to be 6 minutes. It could actually be less. And if a student comes up short in time, you can actually have a question and answer session with them when you ask them. They're supposed to technically be filmed and brought to a SLAR meeting where you would compare their work with the work of other students, with teachers, and you would have a look and to see if they actually meet the features of quality. And we are informed by the features of quality. And the features of quality are all published. And I know that that is an awful lot to take on board, but I would encourage you to read the features of quality. And they remind me a little bit of when I used to do debating with students. What was I looking for in a good debater? I was looking at the presentation, I was looking at the research, their facts, etc. Basic research and communication are the main priorities over 3 school weeks, happening in May or in September, depending on circumstances. 3 minutes per student, individually or in a group. And finally, they should be writing a reflection note. Technically, the wording of the specification says they should be doing this as they go along. So I would have students making a note. Anybody who's done CSPE, you'll know that it's actually easier if they're reflecting as they go through it. But it is over a concentrated 3 weeks. And they're the formats: presentation, interview, performance, and response to a stimulus. If I could give you advice from my experience of it, try and encourage them to do things other than just presentation, or you will be PowerPointed to death. And that is quite painful, as we all know. says she in front of a PowerPoint. Response to a stimulus is lovely, but so too is a performance. I've had students write their own pieces around, imagine a politician came to the door, write the script between the old lady and the politician, what happens in that conversation. And that's really lovely because they have to be, my students did this and they brought in manifestos and brochures, etc., and they interviewed and vox pop people as to what they'd like to ask a politician, and they did all these really exciting things. And by the end, and I know that sounds like a lot, they did it in 3 weeks. They did it in 3 weeks. And that takes us to that's a sample reflection note. We actually have done sample reflections for everything. We did them ourselves because how can you expect a student to do it if you don't know how to do it? So in my opinion, when you get to this moment, it's worthwhile doing a reflection yourself or reading this to see what is it like to reflect, because you really need to be in the student's shoes to get that. And now I'm going to